realized like it's not really my personality, so wasn't something I ended up regretting. It's just kind of like, well, this is what happened, and it is what it is. It's really hard as a woman to kind of break into that field and to start from the bottom. I was trying to sell myself to these people, and I realized I don't really want to do that. It feels like I'm being somebody I'm not.
Welcome to another episode of Not Your Average. I'm one of your hosts, Alexis, and today we have another wonderful guest for you. Katelynne, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Katelynne. So I host a podcast basically discussing everything involving the Chicago Bears. It's called the Bear Down Girl Podcast, and I do that. Right now it's only once a week, but it'll pick up this season and I'll do it twice a week.
Awesome. So first we're going to start before you created the podcast.
Yes, going to college and becoming a parent. I always knew I wanted to go to college. I knew what I wanted to major in, broadcast journalism. So that was never a question. The surprise came when I found out I was going to have a child. I was pregnant, and that happened my freshman year of college. Like halfway through, I found that out. So it completely changed my whole perspective, where I kind of became more goal-oriented. Even more, you think some people, they might, drop out of college if something like that happens to them. For me, it actually drove me even more to want to continue to get my degree. And thankfully, I had the family help to help take care of her so I could still go to college. And so it gave me a whole different perspective just on life. And I think it was the one thing that changed me in the best way. And it gave me some kind of purpose, but then it made me want to go after my goals and dreams even more.
That's awesome. I feel like it's just so hard. I can't imagine, like, thinking about my freshman year of college, I was not prepared for any responsibility.
Right. And I think I've always been a more mature person where something like that, I could handle it and still get through school. I was just too determined to get my degree, so nothing was going to stop me, and I was going to find a way to just kind of not deal with it, but just kind of like make it a part of my life. And okay, this is my life now, so now how am I going to still achieve these goals I want to achieve? So it kind of I think it kind of grounded me a little bit more. And I think maybe it was kind of, I do believe things happen for a reason, and she came into my world for a reason, and it was to make my life better. So.
And I'm so glad that you had family to help. Was your college close to your hometown?
So I grew up around like 10 minutes outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and the school was Millersville University, and that's basically like 10 minutes outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So I would actually, I lived with my parents. I lived at home with them, and I would commute to Millersville, which is like a 45-minute drive. So I would do that, and I would try to kind of put all my classes into like Tuesdays and Thursdays, or just try to make it where I wasn't traveling that much. And so allow the rest of the time where I was still trying to work part-time and also take care of my daughter. So I still like, I actually was always commuting. Like I never lived in a dorm or anything. So I don't even know that aspect of college. I never lived in a dorm. So I just kind of managed that way.
That was going to be one of my next questions. Like, dorm life does not seem conducive to a child.
No. And it was, basically with my situation when I applied for college, and I applied for financial assistance, and I didn't get any kind of grants or anything, but I did get like loans and stuff. And it basically would cover like the tuition, but room and board, I wouldn't even be able to afford room and board. So it just became more convenient going to a place where I could commute to and just stay at home. So I didn't have to worry about paying for that.
No, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. And how was like the actual college experience? Were professors and advisors understanding of your situation and, having to balance parenthood and classes?
Yeah, I think the only time that ever became like a factor was actually when I was about to give birth. It was actually going to my sophomore year, at the very beginning, because she was born in October. So professors like, yeah, we saw your belly. We're not like, we know why you missed some classes. You just gave birth, obviously. So it's like, that was really the only time that I missed classes. I still would always, I don't think I ever missed a class. It's weird. Before I got pregnant, I skipped classes because I was just being a dumb freshman and thinking like, okay, I don't like this class. I don't have to show up all the time. And then ironically, when I become a parent, or maybe that's why, because I'm more responsible, that I came to every single class, no matter what. You would think with that extra responsibility, I might miss some classes, but actually I was like always on top of school like that. And I'm thankful that I had such a good support system with my mom, basically wanting that for me, wanting me to still go to school and get my degree. So it allowed me to kind of knew that I was doing this for a reason, even though it would be time away from my daughter, it was for a reason, that the end goal would be what I would want.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of parents spend time away from their child anyway because of work and other responsibilities. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah. How did were your parents like the main caregivers when you were at school?
So we actually had other family members come in and help out, because she wasn't in any kind of daycare. I mean, daycare is super expensive. I like, it's really hard to put your kids into daycare. It wasn't actually until I graduated and started working full time that she went into daycare. So it was really just, that's why I tried to schedule my classes all in the same 2 days, so we could kind of map it out. Okay, because my mom worked full time, so it's not like they could take care of her, but it was just like other family members or even neighbors, good family friends would help out. So it's kind of like helping raise, like basically raised by a village, so I could just get through college, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool to have that much support around you.
Yeah. I'm very thankful for all the support I had. Yeah.
And did you ever feel like, you didn't have the traditional dorm experience having a child? Most people don't have that their first year of college. Did you ever feel
Right.
like you missed out on something?
Part of me like wonders like what that would have been like. And because already decided beforehand, before having a child became a factor, that I wasn't going to live in a dorm. And so I already, I guess, came to terms with that. But throughout college, I kind of like, kind of FOMO, basically, fear of missing out, when you hear about other things that go on. But I realized also that, I actually liked living at home, that even though, I would make friends and sometimes I'd hang out with them. And I realized, like, you know what, this, I'm kind of like a homebody person anyway, so I'm not like a partier or anything. That was never my personality ever. So like that, it was just kind of like, oh, that would have been interesting to see what that would have been like. But I realized, like, it's not really my personality. So wasn't something I ended up regretting. It's just kind of like, well, this is what happened, and it is what it is.
Yeah, that's good that it just kind of worked out for your personality.
Yeah.
So, are there any other like tips you would give for balancing school and parenthood for someone else who's in a similar situation?
So yeah, because I know usually, if that is a situation, it's kind of like, old, like people are older and then decide to go back to school and try to balance that. And then actually was growing up, that's what my mom did. She went back to school. She did online school. So I kind of got to experience that, from the child's perspective, and then fast forward, like I'm the parent in this situation. So I guess my advice would be is to just kind of not stress yourself out too much, and just try to, hopefully, find avenues, even if you might not have the familiar support, find other ways to make it work. I think the key is always just to be in, be in charge of your mental health, basically. Don't let the stress of all these little things, because sometimes that would get to me, all these little things. And then there's, when you're going to school, the guilt, like, man, I'm away from my child and I feel bad. Like, this is my child. I shouldn't have to, like, I would feel bad feeling like, if someone was taking care of her, it's like, well, it's not their responsibility. It's my child. So I almost feel guilty at sometimes. So it's like, don't beat yourself up about it. Know that if you're going to school, it's for a reason. And the bigger picture is eventually you'll get a good job or you'll make money and it's going to help out your child in the end. So I think the biggest advice I could give is just never let it get to you.
That's good advice. I think for even if you don't have a child,
Yeah. It's basically kind of like, man, all this built up, all this hard work I put into it, all the sacrifices I had to make. I couldn't really live a normal like college experience. I was still working part-time, taking care of a child and in school. So it's kind of like, wow, I could just sit back and said, all this was for something. Like, I actually did it. And I graduated in the 4 years you're supposed to. It didn't like take me a year longer. So I felt proud about that too. And so now the next goal was, okay, I have this degree. Now let's actually, put it to use. And so I decided I worked in retail at times. So I started to bump up to full-time until I got like an actual job that I wanted to be in. And so I did that for almost a year. It wasn't until the beginning of 2017 where I just kept applying, sending out my resume, and I just went into this interview and something clicked with the director who interviewed me. And literally hours after the interview, she's like, we're hiring you. Like, it's just something like, with both of us, it just seemed to be all on the same page. And so that was like the first step, basically. Okay, here's my full-time job. Because my personality is, I am a super independent person. I don't like to rely on other people to help like take care of me financially. I wanted to be able to do that for myself and for my child. And, it gave me, being able to have a job where I could, afford to get my own place. Like, that meant a lot to me because I don't know, I wanted to be in charge of my own life. And it felt good to be able to, not be dependent on my parents and kind of have my own life. And it's like at some point you do have to move away from your parents, and they're your parents and you love them, but you just kind of need your own space and your own space to grow as a person. And so being able to get that job and get my own place, it gave me a lot more self-confidence as well, where I felt, I don't know, better about myself. Because sometimes at times where I felt like I had to depend on other people kind of made me feel a little bit, low about myself. Like, man, I just feel so bad about this. I hate asking for help. It's like one of the worst things ever. And so being able to just kind of get my own place, take care of all my own bills, everything, don't have to ask anybody for anything. It was kind of like, it gave me the kind of boost of confidence I needed.
Was there any moment when you like finally moved into your own place that you were doing something and it hit you that you were kind of on your own and it like full adult independent?
I think when you start to like actually, the most random things, like first when you get get your own place, for me, an apartment, it was like realizing all these things I had to do. Oh my gosh, I got to call these like utility companies, like electric bill, got to set up, like do all these like grown-up things like you never have to think about, like putting everything in my name. And so like just the process of moving, getting everything, and then setting everything up, it was like, whoa, okay, yeah, I'm a grown-up. Like, I have to take care of all these things. I can't just call my mom and say, hey, can you do this for me? It's like, nope, I am an adult. I can do this myself. And that's kind of, it like hit me right away. And it kind of also gave me the realization like, okay, this is a little bit of an adjustment, but I've been ready for this. And all it was I was going to be able to live on my own and be financially, responsible and everything. It was just a matter of getting that job that basically gave me the financial stability. I always knew I was responsible and everything, and I could manage money. And so that was never going to be a big transition for me. It was just kind of like getting the opportunities to kind of set myself up. So yeah, that's basically it.
And what is your job? What do you do?
So it's kind of interesting. It started out where I worked in, it started out as one company, and where it's all about internet marketing. I specifically was hired to be like an email marketer, and it transitioned like a year later. They launched this new company where it was going to be all about being, I guess, the middleman when it comes to families who want to have their children go to a private school, whether it be like just some kind of, religious school, or if it's a Catholic school or any other private school that you would have to pay tuition for. And basically we were going to help out in the process, work with clients. They would with schools and in other scholarship organizations for families who want to put their children in private school or a particular school, but they can't afford it financially. And so what they'll do with us is they'll fill out applications, and my specific job duty is to process all those applications. It deals with a lot of like, because we follow like Pennsylvania tax law, so you have to deal with a lot of like numbers and different tax laws that you have to follow. So for some people it might be monotonous, boring work, but for me it was like the perfect position, because when I transitioned into that, it became like, okay, this is a job for me, because it's a job that allows for a lot of independence. So there it goes. My personality fits perfect for this kind of job where it's basically working on my own. And I'm basically in charge of going through all these applications and processing them and making sure that they have everything they need, and kind of help out these schools who want to give financial assistance to these families.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And of course, though, you got your degree in broadcast journalism. Did you look for jobs in that area originally?
I did. I put anything that involved, because my main degree is like, it's like speech communication with a specialty in broadcast journalism. So it's kind of like this big umbrella of, I could basically fit into any kind of job with a communications degree. But yeah, I did apply for TV stations, radio stations. I did a couple interviews and stuff like that. And I also realized through the interview process that it really wasn't for me. I realized what I wanted to do was more lean towards sports broadcasting. But then I think about, it's really hard as a woman to kind of break into that field and to start from the bottom. And then I'm thinking, I don't really want to work for some kind of local TV station. And it just felt like, I know, hearing the stories, how women are treated and stuff like that. And I realized, first of all, it was about, I just want to get a full-time job that I'm going to be happy in. And then I can still make this, broadcast journalism thing work if I did it my own way. And it took me a little while to realize I didn't have to follow the traditional path. I could create my, and in a modern world that we are in, where it's technology's constantly evolving, and you don't really have to work for a radio station or a TV station as a broadcast journalist. You can kind of create your own platform and network and kind of launch your career that way, or just your passion that way. So it just kind of like, I kind of learned that about myself throughout the whole interview process, and realized like I was trying to sell myself to these people. And I realized I don't really want to do that. It feels like I'm being somebody I'm not. And it feels like I have to put on this face for these people. And I realized, there's a reason why I didn't get hired by one of them. And I think it's because, I don't know if I really wanted to be hired by them, basically.
Yeah, that's probably the best that you realized that before you were hired.
Yeah.
And how did your degree help you, though, in your current full-time job? How does it translate?
Well, there's a lot of, working on a computer technology. There's times on the other company whether they do digital marketing. There's a lot of graphic design, Photoshop and stuff like that. And all these little things, like these classes I had, there were requirements to take if you wanted to get like a broadcast journalism degree. You had to take all these type of like technological classes, or like computer classes, editing, that kind of stuff, video editing. So all these kind of things like I already knew and I was skilled in. And then in terms of communication, kind of goes hand in hand with marketing in some ways. Just basically knowing how to sell, and also my experience in retail and stuff where I was basically I worked at Marshall's for like 3 years, and were required to work to basically kind of get people to sign up for the credit card. So basically you kind of have to be like a saleswoman at that job. So I had all these different skills built up, not just with my degree, but they kind of go hand in hand with what I was hired initially for. But then also now what I specifically do, it's all about communicating with family members. So it's like all that, my communication skills come in hand when it comes to that.
Mm-hmm. And did you find that having to like navigate making sure your child had care, while you're doing classes, did that help at all with communicating with other families?
Oh yeah, I definitely have like a unique perspective where I understand where these family members are coming from in terms of, because some of them when they're applying, they have, different situations, might not have like traditional families where the parents might be split, or they're a single mom. So it's like all these little things I can relate to, and I understand certain things, what these parents deal with, because on the flip side, like, I had to, so I could put her through daycare and afford it. I had to apply for kind of like through the county basically to get childcare assistance, so I wouldn't have to pay the steep price, because anyone who's not a parent, they don't necessarily know like daycare is super expensive, and like it's so these families who want to send their kids to private school, I totally understand like the expenses and how that can be. So I do come from like I do relate to them, I guess.
Yeah. And has it helped you at all, hearing different perspectives from different families? And has that helped you change your perspective or learn something new about how you parent?
I don't know if I've learned anything, because basically we kind of like, it's not like we connect with the families. Like I do communicate with them, but with the job, it's basically you kind of have to take your personal feelings out of it, because it's kind of like you got to follow the guidelines. And sometimes you feel bad when they, tell you certain things and how they're struggling and stuff like that. So it's kind of having to manage the fact, your own personal empathy, but also realizing the job kind of, you have to be strict about it, and you can't make any, I don't know, you kind of like, we strict guidelines we have to follow. So it's kind of, you have to manage those, kind of take your emotions out of it and just kind of like do the job, which it can be hard for some people. But I think for me, I'm more understanding and in terms of the guidelines we have to follow. And I realize like, I'm not trying to be a bad guy, but it's kind of like there's certain rules we have to follow. So even though families might, there's a lot that comes to it where certain like income guidelines we have to follow, and we can't really like make any kind of changes just based off of someone's own personal situation. So that can be the tough part of it, but for me, I feel like I can handle it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, you have a job and you can only do so much.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.